Hello again, everyone. You're listening to another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. My name is Geoff Micks. I'm Executive Platform's Head of Content and Research. My guest today is Paul Bradley of TraceGains. Paul is a veteran product development and product marketing professional with over 20 years in the technology and consulting industries, with a long-standing focus for the food and beverage, restaurant, and retail verticals. He has worked with and learned from some of the largest and most dynamic brands in the industry, and is a passionate but pragmatic advocate for the power of technology to help businesses achieve the resiliency and scale necessary to thrive in a complex global marketplace. Some of you may remember Paul and a colleague were actually guests of my podcast as part of the North American Food Safety and Quality 2022 event. With North American Food Safety and Quality 2024 just around the corner, I'm so pleased I get a chance to connect with him again. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today.
Geoff, thanks so much for having me back. Terrific to be back on the show.
I'd like to start off by talking about one of the challenges so many FSQ professionals face in their working lives, which is the struggle for budget and resources. The quality team is not a profit center or a competitive advantage to the business, and I think everyone is pretty happy about that, but they are fundamental to the success of the business. And being able to take data and paint a picture for senior leaders about what quality teams are doing is a huge part of how they can demonstrate their value. Can we start off by talking about what is new and what is changing when it comes to communicating food safety data?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the paradox, right? For food safety and quality professionals everywhere. If you do everything perfectly, I mean, you just nail it. You are heroic. You get everything right. Nothing happens. I mean, it's sort of the definition of success is that nothing bad happens. But of course, that is really, really easy to miss. And it's so easy for the revenue team, as you said, for the sales and marketing guys. Yeah, they closed a deal. That's really obvious. That's a clear-cut, direct line to success. It can be much, much harder for leadership teams. And I have sympathy for leadership teams on this. It can be harder for them to really understand the value that's being created by food safety teams, by quality teams in the organization. And one of the reasons, that we see for that is that very often all of the data surrounding what those teams are doing is, it's in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere. It's tucked away in a SharePoint. God forbid it's in a filing cabinet. It's dispersed across multiple locations or facilities. It's hard to get at. It's hard to pull that information together and really paint that picture of, hey, you know what? Our continuous improvement actions over the last year created material results in terms of a decrease in nonconformities, a decrease in issues on the plant floor. We've gotten out ahead of preventable issues that could have had major snowballing risk to the business. But all of that really depends on being able to pull that information together, being able to, hey, when something does go wrong, let's track it, let's link it to where it came from, let's link it to what it could have impacted, and let's really make that visible and consumable. And let's build that into some comprehensive reporting and dashboarding. Again, something that the data is always there, but the tools that are used for that data today don't always lend themselves to that. And I think that really makes the world frustrating for a lot of very hardworking teams.
We touched a little on how the definition of success for quality and compliance initiatives, it's complex already, but I'd like to expand on that, especially as it relates to brands who are taking on the challenges of sustainability, carbon footprint reduction, and the accompanying regulatory requirements, which become even more involved for companies with a global footprint. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this has been a big movement for TraceGains this year. We've taken our first big step into sustainability. We've worked for many, many years to help brands manage supplier documentation and data for safety, for quality, for compliance purposes. And this is another flavor of supplier data information coming down from the supply chain that brands need to manage. It's interesting. I think it's really easy sometimes to sort of be, hey, this isn't my domain. That's save the whales. That's not my job. But the reality is it's extremely interconnected. I mean, the food and beverage global supply chain is vast, it is complicated, it is often opaque and difficult to trace. And a lot of forces right now are converging on the need to be better at that, to really have a more detailed, more transparent view of what's happening in our supply chains and be able to really understand how that impacts what we're bringing to market. So when we talk about the definition of success, the old, I won't say old, the current things haven't gone away. We need to provide a great consumer experience. We need to provide safe products. We need to provide compliant products. We need to be mindful of regulatory guidelines. All the same, right? None of that's gone away. But whether it is a regulatory framework. The European Union, the UK particularly, or brands that are exporting to those markets are very, very well aware of this, right? Whether it's that kind of formal structure that we now need to become mindful of for greenhouse gas emissions or water usage or deforestation, or whether it's just consumer demands, people wanting to have the confidence that the products that they buy are not having a negative impact on the world that we live in. The need to respond to that is something that is pulling teams, I think, toward a much more, again, a much more complex and much more nuanced version of what a successful product is. Not just great tasting, not just economically viable, but also sustainable, also with high confidence that there's not child labor or something really negative in that supply chain. Also technically feasible as we get into sustainable packaging. It kind of goes on. And I think it's creating an environment where teams, I would say the bar for collaboration between teams is getting higher as we really think about how to manage those multiple definitions of what it means to bring a good product to market.
Executive Platforms has a whole show on sustainability. And one of the things sustainability leaders are always saying is that, different departments are already collecting their data, and their data is valuable in more than one bucket. And I'm sure it's true of food safety people. There's even a case study I know from the sustainability show where they talk about food waste as an example of, if you can document you're reducing that, it's not just a success for your department, it's a success that we can document for our stakeholders, for our shareholders. Your one action actually helps the company improve its performance across a whole bunch of different metrics. So again, that circles back to the idea of the data tells the story, but which audience should we put it in front of?
Absolutely. I mean, let's get very concrete. We've been talking about the FSMA rule for traceability for a couple of years now, and that the traceability requirements that are part of that have been top of mind for brands in the US. But the reality is, if you want to also look at that through the lens of deforestation, there's a set of regulations in the European Union that also require that lot level traceability back to the point of cultivation. If you want to talk about Scope 3 carbon reporting, you've got to be able to do that. If you want to talk again about labor, forced labor, child labor, you've got to have a very granular understanding of the structure of your supply chain and where things are coming from and where they're going. You just know, going in that so many companies are going to keep that in silos for way too long and realize that you've had teams working on efforts that probably could have been mutually beneficial if they'd been better coordinated from the get-go. And I think that opportunity to really think cross-functionally is there right now for brands that are starting to move in these directions, and it's so important.
I almost feel like I can't run a business podcast these days without talking about AI at some point.
Sure.
Would you mind talking to us about artificial intelligence for food safety professionals? What is still caught up in the hype curve, and what is coming down to earth to become applied technology in the real world?
Yeah, well, I think you just said it. When generative AI and the large language model AI came out really kind of early last year, it's only been that long. It seems a lot longer. We flew up the hype curve really fast. And of course, people saw a lot of aspirational possibilities for what that technology could do for us. And who knows? I think the jury is still out in a lot of ways on where artificial intelligence is going to take us over the next few years. But, I think the wave has receded a little bit from some of the really breathless excitement. I think that's probably good. I've been around technology long enough to have lived through any number of hype curves, and that's a perfectly healthy dynamic. But yeah, I do think it's coming back down to earth. And I think the question that is being asked is, how does this technology really make a difference? How can this technology be applied in ways that are meaningful? And very often, I think, with technology generally, it's not always the sexiest problem that really becomes the difference maker. Sometimes it's actually the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts problems where technology can make a difference. For food safety professionals, lack of standardization in various types of documentation that need to flow through the process, I think, has been there forever. You've got, hey, my suppliers have umpteen different specification formats. I've got all sorts of different documents floating around for my allergens. I've got all sorts of different documents floating around for all the different purposes that I need to collect and manage to keep my food safety and my compliance programs in good shape. And one really interesting area for artificial intelligence, especially the LLM side of it, is improved natural language processing, which is kind of a fancy way of saying machines are getting a lot better at reading documents. They're getting a lot better at looking at a bunch of non-standard documentation and saying, okay, I can read this, interpret it, I can normalize that, I can extract meaningful data from these documents, and I can really accelerate that workflow. Not everything has to be a human being now doing this interpretive exercise to figure out that these two very different looking forms have the same information on them. A machine can do that, and we can manage to the exceptions, or we can manage to issues rather than having to have a human being handling every part of that process. That's not necessarily something where the sky cracks open and we're in a whole different industry, but it's something where we get faster, we get a little bit more efficient, we potentially get a little bit more accurate, and we can increase our agility to be able to work with different suppliers, work with different materials, onboard and qualify more quickly, and things get a little faster and a little better. So those incremental improvements that come from really directly applied aspects of the technology we're putting effort there, and I think so. Those are actually some of the areas that are going to be most exciting.
I love that example, and it actually sort of resonates with something quite a few people have told me. The first one is that as cool as this stuff is, nothing is going to be adopted unless it actually solves something the business needs doing. It needs to be pulled in rather than pushed in by someone who says, hey, we just spent money on this, figure out something to do with it. And then the other part is, especially with an example like document management, the people who care about food safety didn't get into that living to take a form, put it into a spreadsheet, take someone else's form, figure out how to put that into a spreadsheet. If you can automate that grunt work and let them start actually doing the stuff that makes a difference, they're going to feel empowered. They're going to feel better about what they do with their shift or their time at the company. So it's interesting to see. And maybe a third thing also is it's easier to get buy-in from upstairs. Hey, we want this tool. They already know what AI is. And when you can put document management as an example of, that's not even good just for food safety. That's good for everybody. Like, let's buy the thing that is going to make this easy for us. I think that ticks so many boxes. And as you say, it's not the sexy problem being solved, but it's something that everybody's like, yes, I would like to spend less time on document management.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I actually really think you just nailed one of the real areas of promise for artificial intelligence, which is just, man, can you automate some of the tedious scut work that goes on in every organization and free up these really brilliant people that we have to do the things that they're passionate about and the things that they're great about, and you're right. It is something I think has the potential to really work cross-functionally. You're the folks that are working on sourcing and procurement, and the folks that are in R&D looking for new and novel materials to solve new development problems. They didn't sign up for that because they wanted to sit around and wait for the phone to ring and send emails out into the ether and try to wrangle samples from some guy somewhere. There are things that they want to do, that they have talent, they have passion for, that they want to be able to move more quickly on. And those are all areas where I think the technology can come in and just lift some of the repetitive work, lift some of that non-value added work that exists in every single company, and just get people back to what they're great at. I think that's exciting in and of itself.
Now, I've been working with TraceGains across a number of our events for quite a few years now. You're interested in a lot of things, and obviously it's a very exciting time for a technology company. Just before we started recording, you mentioned you've had a busy summer. I hope I'm not asking you to tell anything too early, but you are going to be at Food Safety and Quality 2024 in September. Are there some things you're excited to be sharing with the audience, the people who come by your booth, the people who want to talk to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're always excited for the show. We always really enjoy being there, and it's a treat every year to be able to come and participate and meet some old friends and make some new ones. So we're absolutely excited about it. Yeah, I would actually go back to the whole aspect of continuous improvement, preventative action management. That is an area where we have really pushed our solution forward this year, and we'll talk about that at the booth with folks who are interested. But it really goes back to that piece that I mentioned of. At the end of the day, if we could really get to the heart of the non-conformances that exist in a process, really get our arms around those, really get good, tight tracking from that issue to a complaint, to a corrective action request, but also to maybe a C of A, maybe an audit. If I can trend that data over time, if I can really start to have a more data-informed risk ranking of my supplier network and really get my arms around all of that, it starts to paint that valuable picture of what the food safety and quality profession really is doing for all of us, and not just in the industry, but as consumers and as parents and as and just as human beings in the world. So we're excited about that. We have a sense of mission about that. We've done some really interesting things with the technology there, and that's definitely something we're looking forward to speaking to people about. And the other piece, as I mentioned, of course, is the tie-in to sustainability and the fact that even though that is not part of the food safety world traditionally, there is so much overlap between what we need to accomplish for food safety and quality and what we need to accomplish for global sustainability and greenhouse gas emissions and all these other really important aspects that we're all working on. So we're excited to talk about how those pieces can come together and this kind of converged collaborative future that I think is building around that.
You know, as exciting as new tools and technologies are, I always try to put myself in the position of the user. And so in this case, it would be a food safety and quality professional, probably a leader of a team, and they're thinking, you know, as great as all of these new capabilities are, I'm not getting the bandwidth from IT to, you know, train me to do this, to train my team to do this. People get very comfortable, very complacent, but I think AI is one of those things that it's designed to be user friendly. It's designed to overcome that pain point. And I wonder if we could talk about that a little.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we always say the users are the heroes of the food and beverage industry, right? It's we try to always keep the frontline user in mind and in the forefront of our focus as we're developing technology on our side. But I mean, you know, and as a longstanding tech guy, I've been in the technology side of the industry for I always say over 20 years, but it's well over 20 years. You know, that notion of actually, you know, how we help people get over the hump for new technologies and actually get comfortable with them and use them effectively is an eternal challenge. And it is an area where I think AI really is changing the game. This again, you know, I mentioned this term natural language processing, the ability of a system to interact with a person in natural spoken human, you know, language like we're using right now. That's actually hard from a technology standpoint. And that's something that the new generation of AI tools and generative AI tools is really moving us forward on. And, you know, to make that concrete, that where that can start to make a difference is, you know, let's say I'm sourcing a new ingredient and, you know, I'm going in there in traditional ways and I'm trying to find something and I need a certain granularity and a certain moisture content. And I've got all these things, you know, that I need to specify and data I need to put into that process, however I'm doing that, and do that in correct ways and, you know, hopefully use the right terminology for people that I'm trying to find. That's tough to do, you know. Where I think the technology will take us and is beginning to take us even now is where I can come in and say, hey, I'm trying to solve such and such a problem with this material I'm trying to create. I'm trying to create a new ingredient that does X, Y, and Z, or a new product that does X, Y, and Z. And the solution can be much, much better at saying, okay, given that, I can make a lot of these assumptions about what you're going to need, and I can intelligently recommend some paths to you that you can explore that are much more, you know, informed by data that the solution is going out into the world and finding and bringing forward. So, you know, getting from a place where I've got to have a lot of knowledge going into the sourcing experience to a place where I can have a lot of questions going into the sourcing experience, and the technology can help me get there, I think is really exciting. Again, it's an ongoing path to get there. And, you know, the watchword about AI is always that it's only as good as the data that it's trained on and only as good as the data it has to consume. And there's a lot of work happening along that vector. We're thinking a lot about that. But I think there really is a future where the interaction between professionals and between all that global data that's out there can become a lot more natural, a lot more human, if you will, for want of a better term, and be something that people can just go into without a lot of background and training and have a much more natural experience of doing that.
I'm so pleased you mentioned without a lot of background or experience, because one of the things that I've been hearing in the space, and you mentioned it yourself, the idea that someone can go in and ask questions. This is going to be such a powerful tool for frontline workers in a world where, you know, the baby boomers are retiring. There is high turnover. There is an opportunity here to standardize and share best practices through an AI tool with people who are trying to do their job effectively on a plant floor or on a supply chain distribution center where they're checking things. What is the best way to do my job in this space? And their phone can walk them through it using an AI tool through a company like TraceGains or one of these others that are saying, you know, this is how we want to collect data. This is the correct way to collect data. This is the data you need by the time you're done your job. Here's some ways to get it. And I just think it's such a powerful opportunity to bring new people in and bring them up to speed faster than you ever did in traditional training.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and labor is on everybody's mind right now, right? I mean, you're absolutely right. We have a generational shift taking place in the industry. It's not as easy to find talent as it has been at various times in the past. It's certainly more expensive. And, this is an industry, certain parts of our industry do tend to have fairly high turnover. And, I think we know from experience that if you can bring somebody into a new role, get them comfortable, get them confident, make them feel like they've got the tools in their hands to be successful, you can also retain that talent. You can get that person on a faster learning curve, a faster path to proficiency. That's less turnover, that's less retraining, that's less disruption to the organization, and really just bringing back to that human factors aspect of how do we make people successful? How do we make them feel like they're going to be successful and they're set up for success? And get them focused on things that are rewarding on a personal level for them to do versus, maybe repetitive, difficult, confusing. All of those things I think they're emerging competencies for organizations that want to be competitive on the talent battlefield, which quite honestly is pretty significant in a lot of areas.
Paul, I know we've covered so much ground in this conversation, and you've been very generous with your time. Before I let you go, if there were a couple of key takeaways you want people to think about further, maybe follow up with you at the event next month, what are some things that you would want to highlight for them?
I will go back to and I know this is going to sound like the most just kind of standard business book thing to say, but collaboration is king, I think, as we look out over the next few years. And we really, when you think about whether it's safety, whether it's quality, whether it's all this multi-jurisdictional compliance that more and more organizations are having to deal with, whether it's sustainability, whether it's just doing the right thing for consumers, all of these aspects that are acting on the industry right now are driving us to figure out how to break down organizational silos, figure out how to work better with our colleagues, but also work better with our suppliers, work better with our manufacturing partners, and create that more collaborative, more interconnected, more transparent industry. And, at the end of the day, a lot of that, we've talked about unsexy problems, right? A lot of that comes down to the effective flow of data and information between partners and between groups. We are doing everything that we do right now from a solution development standpoint with that in mind. How can we help teams work better together? How can we help information flow more seamlessly through all those increasingly complex workflows? And I think it's just an incredibly exciting place to be. So we love to have that conversation. We love to talk about the challenges that organizations have and hopefully how we can help break down some of those walls and bring some of those changes about. So again, really looking forward to the show. Really looking forward to the conversations we're going to have there. And by all means, come reach out to us there if you're going to be there. And if you're not, TraceGains.com or gather.tracegains.com to experience our networked ingredients marketplace. Great places to just get started, get to know us a little bit, and we're more than happy to carry on the conversation.
I'm so pleased you offered some contact information because, of course, while I hope many of our listeners are going to the show, of course, we do put this podcast out in front of everybody in the Executive Platforms Network. We were talking about sustainability content earlier in the show. I'm going to bring this episode to the attention of the people going to our sustainability show. So, yes, please do visit TraceGains' website if that's new to you. This is a long-term partner of Executive Platforms. They are an industry leader for a reason, and I know they've been working on some exciting stuff throughout this sort of AI boom that is happening. They've had an exciting summer. I'm really looking forward to talking to Paul and some of his colleagues on site next month. But in the meantime, why don't I say, Paul, thank you so much for your time. This has been great.
Geoff, it is always a pleasure. Can't wait to do it again, and can't wait to see you in Austin.
Absolutely. You're listening to another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint Podcast Series. I've been Geoff Micks. Let's do it again soon.